How do you measure time when the sun is a stranger? Not by a clock. The batteries died a long time ago. Not by the light filtering through the periscope. That only tells you day from not day, a binary distinction that has lost most of its meaning. You measure it in sweat. You measure it by the slow, sticky creep of moisture that blossoms in the small of your back, that traces the line of your spine like a phantom finger. You measure it by the way your shirt, the same shirt you wore yesterday and the day before, clings to your skin with the desperate embrace of a dying man. You measure it in the salt that stings your eyes and the dampness in the crook of your elbow that never, ever dries. It's 110 degrees today. Or it was the last time the salvage thermometer gave a reading before the mercury decided to permanently retire at the top of its glass prison. It feels hotter. The concrete walls of this place, this bunker with a view of nothing, they don't protect you from the heat. They absorb it. They breathe it. During the day, they soak up the punishment of the world above, and at night, they exhale it back onto you. A slow, suffocating blanket of stored thermal energy. The air is thick. You can feel it in your lungs, a heavy, wet substance that isn't quite air anymore. It's a soup of your own recycled breath, the faint metallic tang of aging canned goods, and the ghost of ozone from a long-dead air purifier. Every breath is a conscious effort. Every movement is a negotiation with a hostile environment that lives inside with you. Your armpits are angry. That's not a joke. It's a clinical diagnosis. They are irritated, a simmering rage against the constant friction and the inescapable damp. This is the reality that the flickering projections of the before times never showed you. They showed heroes in leather striding through dusty plains. They never showed the chafing. They never showed the unending low-grade misery of a body that can't cool itself down. Your only companion is the slow drip of condensation from a pipe in the ceiling. Drip. A tiny silver teardrop forming. Drip. It hangs there, swelling, reflecting the dim glow of your battery-powered lamp. Drip. It falls, striking a rusted metal plate on the floor with a pathetic tink that is the loudest sound you've heard in a week. That sound is a symphony and a torture. It is the sound of water, of coolness, of everything you don't have. And right there on the small table next to your cot sits the reason for this entire meditation on misery. Your last can of soda. It's not a famous brand. It's some off-brand citrus monstrosity you found in the back of a desiccated convenience store 6 months ago. The can is warm to the touch, not room temperature, warmer. It feels alive, bloated with heat. You know, if you were to open it, the liquid inside would be syrupy, cloying, and offer no relief whatsoever. It might even make things worse. But it represents something. A memory of civilization. A memory of a time when cold was a setting on a dial, not a forgotten god you pray to in the dark. It's funny what you miss. Not the grand things. Not the internet, not the bustling cities. Not even other people most of the time. You miss the little miracles of the mundane. The effortless hum of a refrigerator. The sharp, clean crack of an ice cube tray. The glorious shock of a cold drink on a hot day. These things weren't luxuries. They were the very fabric of life, the invisible scaffolding that held up your sanity. And now the scaffolding is gone, and you're just left dangling over the abyss of a warm soda. This is the great filter they never talked about. Not the asteroids, not the plagues, not the wars. The great filter is the slow, grinding erosion of comfort. It is the understanding that the entire magnificent, glittering tower of human achievement was built on a single, fragile assumption, that the power would always be on. We were gods, you think. We really were. We could command summer and winter from a plastic panel on the wall. We could summon light with the flick of a finger. We could speak to people on the other side of the planet instantly. We built a world so complex, so interconnected, that its very complexity became its fatal flaw. Every system was dependent on another. The water pumps needed the power grid, needed the fuel refineries. The fuel refineries needed the global shipping network. The global shipping network needed satellite communications, and all of it, every last bit, needed people to show up to work and believe the numbers in their bank accounts meant something. It wasn't a fortress. It was a house of cards in a hurricane, and we just happened to be living in a decade of good weather. What a colossal, beautiful, arrogant failure it all was. Now all that's left is the raw science of the universe. Gravity still works. Thermodynamics is still the law. And you are a creature of flesh and blood, subject to its ironclad rules. Your body is a machine that generates heat, and without a way to shed that heat, it will fail. Simple as that. This knowledge, this project for today, didn't come from a sudden stroke of genius. It came from a book. A real, physical book you risked your life for. You remember the day. A scavenging run to the ruins of the old state university. The air outside tasted like baked asphalt and regret. The sun was a malevolent eye in a bleached white sky. You moved from shadow to shadow, a ghost in a dead city, every sense screaming. The science library was a tomb. Books lay in drifts on the floor, their pages swollen and warped from cycles of damp and dry. The air smelled of decaying paper and the dust of forgotten knowledge. You weren't looking for history or poetry. You were looking for truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need a plug. You found it in the chemistry section on a bottom shelf, protected from the worst of the roof leaks by a collapsed bookcase above it. Fundamentals of Inorganic Chemistry, a textbook from a time before interactive simulations and online modules. Its cover was a hideous shade of 70s orange. Its pages were dense with equations and diagrams that made your head swim. But you took it. It felt heavy. It felt real. Back in the bunker, you spent weeks reading it by the faint light of your lamp. Most of it was useless, theoretical nonsense about orbital shells and covalent bonds. But then you found a small chapter on endothermic reactions. A footnote, really? A classroom demonstration to show how breaking certain chemical bonds can absorb energy from the environment instead of releasing it. It talked about things farmers used, things you'd seen in faded bags in the back of abandoned garden centers. And a single beautiful sentence lodged itself in your brain, resulting in a rapid and significant drop in temperature, capable of freezing water in standard atmospheric conditions. You read it again, and again. It was a key to a door you thought was welded shut. The door back to one of those small, mundane miracles. The door to cold. So here you are, the heat pressing in, the warm soda sitting in judgment. The memory of a dusty orange book? You have a choice. You can surrender to the heat, you can drink the warm, syrupy liquid and call it a day, or you can fight back. You can use the forgotten knowledge of a dead world to wage a small, private war against the second law of thermodynamics. You can refuse to accept the tyranny of your environment. This isn't about comfort anymore. This is about rebellion. This is about staring into the hot, indifferent face of the apocalypse and spitting in its eye. And so, you're going to perform an act of pure, distilled alchemy. You are going to take one of the most common agricultural chemicals ever produced, a substance designed to give life, and you are going to use it to create its polar opposite. You are going to make a little piece of winter right here in the suffocating heart of summer. Forget the grid. Forget scavenging dead freezers. The only salvation is in a dusty bag of farm chemicals and a little bit of spite. This is how you turn fertilizer into the ultimate post-apocalyptic luxury. This is how you make ice. The time for philosophy is over. The heat has made its argument, and now you must deliver your rebuttal. Your rebuttal will not be written in words, but in the brutal, elegant language of chemistry. It is time to build. Gather your instruments. They are not tools of convenience, but artifacts of survival, each with a history of rust and desperation. First, you'll need the catalyst, the white heart of this entire operation, a bag of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. Look at it. The bag is probably made of woven plastic, faded and brittle from years of silent waiting in some forgotten shed. The logo on the front, a cheerful sun smiling over a verdant field, is a cruel joke from a dead world. In the before times, people bought this stuff by the ton, used it to coax impossibly green lawns from suburban soil, or to grow the food that filled the gleaming supermarkets. They had no idea they were stocking their garages with a key to cryogenic defiance. If you can't find a full bag, you must perform surgery. You'll need one of those blue instant cold packs, the kind people used to keep in first aid kits for sprained ankles and bruised egos. Remember those? A minor inconvenience was an excuse to deploy a miracle of portable endothermic reaction. Now that miracle is your Excalibur. Cut it open carefully and you'll find a pouch of water and a collection of small white pellets. Those pellets, that is the prize. That is your ammonium nitrate. You'll need water, not just any water. It must be as clean as you can manage. Every impurity, every speck of dirt, every dissolved salt is an enemy of the process. It is a saboteur that will lower the freezing point and demand more energy than your reaction can steal. This water is more precious than gasoline. Treat it as such. Next, you need 2 bowls. They must be metal. This is not an aesthetic choice. It is a law of physics. You need a big metal bowl, your reaction chamber, your cauldron. It should be heavy, solid, its surface cool and impassive. Then a smaller metal bowl or a simple tin cup. This will be the cradle, the vessel where the magic will solidify. Do not even consider using plastic. Plastic is an insulator. It hoards heat. It would be like trying to fight a fire with a wet blanket that is also on fire. Finally, you'll need your best mad scientist face. This is the grim, focused expression of someone who is about to bend the rules of nature to their will. Put it on now. The work begins. Step 1. This is the moment of commitment. Take your large metal bowl and place it on a stable, level surface. The concrete floor is best. It will act as a willing victim, offering up its own thermal energy to your process. Now, take a scoop of the ammonium nitrate pellets and dump them into the bowl. Listen to the sound they make, a dry, scratchy whisper, like sand pouring into an hourglass that measures the end of the world. The pellets are small, white, and deceptively benign, like harmless pellets of salt. They have no smell, but you can feel a strange dryness in the air around them, a desiccating presence. You are holding solid, structured energy in your hands. Pour just enough of your precious water over the pellets to cover them, to create a thick, soupy slurry. Do not drown them. You are creating a concentrated hunger for heat, not a weak, diluted broth. Begin to stir with a metal spoon. The instant the water touches the pellets, the reaction begins. You will feel it immediately, not as a sound or a sight, but as a deep, invasive cold that travels up the spoon and into your hand. It's not the gentle coolness of a shadow, it's a vampiric cold, an active, energy-draining force that bites at your fingertips. The metal of the bowl begins to sweat, not from the ambient heat, but from the air itself gasping and condensing on its rapidly chilling surface. The water in the bowl becomes cloudy, a milky white vortex as you stir, the little bits dissolving, vanishing, and in their vanishing, unleashing this incredible power. The air around the bowl will seem to shimmer and crackle. You have created a localized winter, a pocket of anti-summer. Now let's talk about the beautiful, violent science of what you just did. The ammonium nitrate pellets are not just little rocks, they are a crystalline lattice. Think of it as a city, a perfectly ordered metropolis of ammonium ions and nitrate ions, all held together by the powerful electromagnetic forces of their ionic bonds. They are stable. They are content. Then you introduce the water. Water molecules are the barbarians at the gate. They are polar, one end slightly positive, the other slightly negative, and they are relentless. They swarm the crystal city. The negative end of a water molecule latches onto a positive ammonium ion, while the positive ends of other water molecules surround a negative nitrate ion. They pull. They tear. They rip the city of ions apart, dissolving it into the water. This act of destruction, this process of dissolution, is not free. It requires a massive payment of energy to break those strong ionic bonds. This is the crucial part. The reaction doesn't have its own internal source of energy, so it becomes a thief. It steals the energy it needs from its immediate surroundings. This is an endothermic reaction. It pulls thermal energy, what you feel as heat, out of the water itself, out of the metal bowl, out of the air, and out of your own skin. The temperature plummets not because you are creating cold, but because you are orchestrating a heist of heat on a molecular level, leaving behind a profound thermal void. You have weaponized entropy, but do not become arrogant in your newfound power. There are 1,000 ways to fail. If you add too much water from the start, you create a weak, diluted solution. The barbarian horde of water molecules will be too spread out. They will tear the crystal city apart, yes, but too slowly, too inefficiently. The resulting temperature drop will be pathetic, a mild chill instead of an Arctic blast. You will have wasted your precious chemicals and your even more precious water for nothing more than a bowl of cool, slightly toxic water. A fatal error. And your choice of a metal bowl was critical. Had you used a ceramic or plastic bowl as mentioned, you would have insulated your reaction. Plastic is a poor conductor of heat. The endothermic reaction would have occurred, but the bowl itself would have acted as a barrier, preventing the cold from effectively projecting outward. The slurry would get cold, but that cold would be trapped, unable to reach the target you were about to introduce. It would be like building a bonfire inside a thermos and wondering why the outside doesn't feel warm. Worse still, be careful with the mixture itself. While not acutely toxic in this form, a concentrated paste of ammonium nitrate on your skin, especially with an open cut, can cause a nasty chemical burn. In this new world without doctors or antibiotics, a simple skin lesion can be a death sentence. The ultimate tragic irony would be to succeed in making ice only to die from an infection caused by the process. Handle it with the respect a loaded gun deserves. Step 2. Now for the prize. Take your smaller metal bowl, your cup, your cradle. Fill it with your plain, clean water. Not to the brim. Leave a little room for expansion, a subtle nod to the laws of physics that even in this fallen world you must obey. This is the water you want to freeze. This is the part that will, in a few minutes, become a solid block of pure, unadulterated relief. The water sits there, placid, reflecting the dim light of your bunker. It is currently at the ambient temperature of this hellscape, a lukewarm liquid teeming with kinetic energy. Its molecules are zipping around, chaotic and free. You are about to impose order on them. You are about to bring them to a standstill. This simple act of filling a cup with water feels profound. In the before times, you would get this from a tap, filtered and chilled from a dispenser and a refrigerator door. You wouldn't even think about it. It was an unlimited resource. Now, every drop is a calculated expenditure. This water represents a successful scavenging run, a working filter, a moment of foresight. You are not just filling a cup, you are investing your survival into this experiment. The science of this stage is simpler but no less elegant. It's about potential. The water in the small cup is a reservoir of thermal energy. It is hot relative to the chemical slurry you've created. The second law of thermodynamics dictates that heat will always flow from a hotter object to a colder object, seeking equilibrium. Your job is not to break this law, but to exploit it mercilessly. The water in that cup wants to give away its heat. You have just created the perfect, ravenous recipient for it. The potential difference is enormous, a thermal waterfall waiting to be unleashed. Think about the potential for error. The most common and most foolish mistake is using contaminated water. If your water is salty, for example, you have a real problem. The presence of salt ions in the water disrupts the formation of the hexagonal ice crystals. It's like trying to build a perfect wall with rocks of all different shapes and sizes. The water molecules can't lock into their rigid structure as easily. This means you need to get the water to an even lower temperature to force it to freeze. It's called freezing point depression. Your ammonium nitrate slurry might drop the temperature to, say, 15 degrees Celsius. That's more than enough to freeze pure water, which freezes at 0 degrees. But salty water might not freeze until 18 or 20 degrees. a temperature your makeshift chemical reaction simply cannot reach. You will have created a very, very cold cup of salt water, which is almost more insulting than the warm soda. Another error is overfilling the cup. As water freezes, it expands by about 9%. This is because as the molecules lock into their crystal lattice, they are forced into a structure that takes up more space than their free-flowing liquid form. If you fill the cup to the very top, the expanding ice could crack your container. In a world where a good metal cup is a treasured heirloom, breaking one due to a moment of carelessness is a crime. It is a failure to respect the materials, a failure to respect the science. Step 3. The contact. The marriage of hot and cold. This is the most delicate part of the physical process. Carefully, with steady hands, pick up the small bowl of water. Gently place it inside the big cold bowl, setting it down directly into the chemical slush. The goal is to create a bowl and a bowl sandwich, as the old-timers would say. You want the cold mixture to make as much contact as possible with the bottom and sides of the smaller bowl. Wiggle it gently to ensure it's settled in. You should hear a faint sizzle, a tiny protest, as the relatively hot metal of the small cup meets the ferociously cold slurry. You are now actively conducting heat away from your target. The metal of the two bowls is the bridge. It is the conduit through which the thermal energy will flow. The science here is conduction, the most intimate form of heat transfer. The slurry, starved for energy, is pulling heat directly from the outer surface of the smaller bowl. The metal of that bowl, being an excellent conductor, allows the heat from the water inside to flow rapidly through its structure to the colder outer surface. A chain reaction of heat loss begins. The water molecules touching the inside walls of the cup are the first to feel the drain. They lose their kinetic energy, slow down, and begin their transformation. This process radiates inward, from the outside of the water to the center, a creeping, solidifying frost that is conquering the liquid chaos. The efficiency of this entire process hinges on this single point of contact. What if you fail? What if your hands shake and you place the bowl off center, leaving a significant air gap between the slurry and the side of the cup? Air is a terrible conductor. It is an insulator. That air gap becomes a wall. The heat transfer will be dramatically reduced, happening only through the small point of contact at the bottom. The process will take hours instead of minutes, and by then, your endothermic reaction will have warmed up, having stolen all the heat it can from the surrounding air. The experiment will fail. You must ensure a snug, intimate fit. Another potential error is a leak. What if there is a tiny pinhole in your smaller cup? The toxic ammonium nitrate solution will leak into your drinking water. You might not even notice. The resulting ice block would be contaminated. Ingesting it could lead to nausea, vomiting, or worse. In your moment of triumph, you would have poisoned yourself. All your hard work, all your clever application of science, undone by a single overlooked imperfection. Every component of your system must be flawless. Now there is nothing left to do. You have assembled the apparatus. You have charged it with the necessary reagents. You have initiated the reaction. Now you must simply watch. The condensation on the outside of the big bowl will thicken, and then, like a miracle, it will bloom into a delicate white layer of frost. The bunker's humid air touching the impossibly cold metal is freezing on contact. You have created a surface so cold it can pull solid water directly from the air. Look into the small cup. The surface of the water will begin to look glassy. A thin, crystalline film will spread from the edges, a spiderweb of ice. The magic science juice is doing its work. It is sucking the heat away with an invisible, relentless force. No fridge, no electricity. Just fertilizer and spite. You have bent the laws of the universe to your will. Boom. Ice. The survivor gently lifted the small tin cup out of the chemical slush. It was painfully cold, the kind of cold that felt sharp, like 1,000 tiny needles pressing into his fingertips. A delicate filigree of frost had climbed the cup's metal sides, a beautiful and temporary crown for his creation. He set it down on the concrete floor, and for a moment, he just looked at it. Inside the cup, the water was no longer water. It was a solid, opaque block of victory. He could see the stress fractures within it, the tiny trapped air bubbles that had been caught in their frantic dance as the cold took hold. They were like prehistoric insects trapped in amber, fossils from the liquid age. This wasn't just frozen water, it was an artifact, proof that the universe could still be reasoned with, or at least tricked. He had stared into the sweltering, indifferent face of physics and, for a brief moment, had made it blink. The silence of the bunker seemed different now. It wasn't the dead, oppressive silence of a tomb. It was a respectful, expectant silence. The silence of a cathedral just before the choir begins to sing. And the survivor was the high priest of this dilapidated church, and the block of ice was his holy sacrament. A ritual was required. This was not a moment for haste. This was a moment to be savored, a memory to be carefully constructed, because in a world where the future was a fog, memories were the only real currency you had. He turned to his primary storage locker, a large footlocker of military green steel that he had dragged back from a National Guard checkpoint 3 winters ago. He worked the combination lock, the metallic clicks echoing in the chamber. Inside, nestled among bags of rice, medical supplies, and ammunition, was the object of his desire. The true purpose of this entire endeavor. He reached in with the reverence of an archaeologist, unearthing a pharaoh's tomb, and pulled out a single can of beer. It was a Pilsner, from a microbrewery that had probably been a pile of rubble and rust for a generation. The label was faded but still legible, featuring a cartoonish drawing of a lumberjack wrestling a bear. It was a relic of a time of such absurd abundance and whimsy that it felt like a message from an alien civilization. He had been saving it for a year. He had found it in the basement of a collapsed suburban home, a single forgotten can in a dusty mini-fridge, its brothers and sisters long since consumed or exploded from the relentless cycles of freezing and thawing. But this one had survived. He'd carried it back to the bunker like a holy grail. He had designated it the Victory Can, to be opened only upon the successful completion of a task deemed sufficiently impossible. Today was that day. He held the can in one hand and the cup of ice in the other. He felt a strange pang in his chest, a ghost of an emotion he couldn't quite name. It was nostalgia, but sharper. It was the memory of what things like this were for. Beer wasn't for drinking alone in a concrete box. It was for noise, for laughter, for clinking glasses with friends after a long week of meaningless work. It was for barbecues in postage stamp-sized backyards, the smell of charcoal mingling with cut grass. It was for shouting at a television screen with a group of people who, for 90 minutes, were your family. It was a social lubricant, a catalyst for connection. To drink it alone felt wrong, a perversion of its intended purpose. He shook his head. "Stop it," he muttered, his voice a dry rasp. "Connection is what got everyone killed." He was right, of course. The intricate web of society that had allowed for the creation of microbrews and backyard barbecues was the same web that had transmitted the collapse so efficiently. A contagion of failure that had spread through the fiber optic nerves of civilization until the whole thing just shut down. Solitude was safety. Loneliness was a shield. This beer would not be a tool for connection. It would be a reward for disconnection, for surviving, for being the last one standing in the quiet room after the party had ended in bloodshed. Now he needed the proper vessel, not the tin cup the ice was in. No, that wouldn't do. He went to a small shelf where he kept his few personal effects. He pushed aside a tarnished silver locket and a dog-eared copy of a poetry book, and picked up a heavy glass mug. It was thick, ridiculously so, with a large, sturdy handle. It was a German Stein, a souvenir his parents had brought back from a trip he'd been too busy to go on. Oktoberfest 2019 was written on it in a cheerful, looping font. He'd once thought it was tacky. Now it was the finest piece of glassware on the planet. Its weight felt good in his hand, solid, real. He placed the Stein on the table with a satisfying thud. The next step was the extraction. He took a multi-tool from his belt and, using the awl, carefully chipped at the block of ice. It splintered with a sound like breaking glass. He worked with the precision of a jeweler, breaking off several large, irregular chunks and letting them fall into the stein. They clinked against the glass, a sound he hadn't heard in so long it made him flinch. It was the sound of a restaurant, of a bar, of civilization. He stared at the ice in the glass. It was beautiful. It caught the dim lamplight, refracting it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. He was ready. The moment was at hand. He held the victory can over the stein. His thumb found the pull tab. He paused. A final moment of anticipation. He thought he heard something. A faint scratching sound coming from the direction of the main ventilation duct. He froze, every muscle tensed. He was not alone, but the sound didn't come again. He relaxed his shoulders. Rats, he breathed. Just rats. The bunker was full of them. Small, scrawny things that were more afraid of him than he was of them. He had learned to live with the sound of their tiny claws in the walls. They were a part of the ecosystem. He turned his attention back to the can. He pulled the tab. A weak hiss escaped. Not the crisp, explosive psst of a freshly carbonated beverage, but a tired, geriatric sigh. The last gasp of a long-dead factory. It didn't matter. He tilted the can, and the amber liquid poured over the ice. The crackling sound filled the silence. It was applause. It was a standing ovation from a ghost audience. He watched the foam rise and then quickly dissipate. The beer was probably flat. The ice was probably melting too fast. None of it mattered. This was his moment. He raised the heavy stein. The glass was already cold, condensation beating on its surface. He could feel the chill on his fingertips, a blessed relief from the oppressive heat of the bunker. This was it. The first truly cold drink in a year. A reward for his ingenuity, for his persistence, for his sheer, bloody-minded refusal to surrender to the heat. As he brought the rim of the mug to his lips, a blur of motion exploded from the ventilation duct. It was not a rat. It was a creature born of this new, broken world, a possum but twisted. It was larger than any possum he had ever seen, its fur a mangy patchwork of gray and black. Its movements were not the clumsy waddle of its ancestors, but a fluid, unnervingly fast scuttle. And it had 3 eyes, 2 in the normal place, gleaming like black beads, and a third, larger one in the center of its forehead, milky white and unblinking. Before the survivor could even process the grotesque sight, the creature was on the table. It moved with a speed that defied its bulk, a blur of fur and teeth and that terrible third eye. With a wiry 5-fingered paw, it snatched the heavy glass stein right out of his hand. His grip, loosened in the moment of anticipated pleasure, was not strong enough. The sheer audacity of the act left him paralyzed. The 3-eyed possum, Stein held securely in its grasp, did not pause. It shot back across the table and vanished into the darkness of the ventilation duct it had emerged from. The entire event took less than 2 seconds. The survivor stood there, his hand still frozen in the air, shaped around a mug that was no longer there. His mouth was slightly open, ready for a sip that would never come. The silence rushed back in, now heavier and more mocking than before. And then he heard it. Faintly from deep within the metallic labyrinth of the ventilation system, a series of sounds. A clatter as the glass mug was dropped. A lapping sound, a contented, guttural purr. He stood in the oppressive heat of his bunker, listening to the faint, distant sound of a mutated marsupial enjoying his one perfect, ice-cold beer. For a long moment, he did nothing. He didn't scream. He didn't curse. He didn't smash his fists against the concrete walls. He simply stood there, a statue of thwarted ambition. The universe wasn't just indifferent. It had a sense of humor. A cruel, slapstick, deeply ironic sense of humor. All that knowledge, all that work, all that beautiful, elegant science. All for the refreshment of a 3-eyed rodent. He slowly lowered his hand. He looked at the wet ring of condensation on the table where the mug had been. He looked at the discarded chemical bowl, its purpose served, its magic spent. A single dry chuckle escaped his lips. It grew into a quiet, wheezing laugh that held no joy, only a profound and weary understanding of his place in the cosmos. He was the straight man in a cosmic joke. He finally turned, his eyes finding the imagined camera of his own internal monologue. He sighed, the laugh dying in his throat. "Play responsibly," he muttered to the empty air.